My next guest is Dr. Gustafson. He is an elementary school principal in Minnesota, an author and speaker. He believes schools can be spaces where creativity and innovation thrive, but only when we prioritize relationships and a relevant, connected pedagogy. His latest book is Reclaiming Our Calling. His previously published books include Renegade Leadership, which we'll talk about on this podcast. He also hosts a podcast called School Leadership Unearthed, which can be found on BAM Radio's network's Tweet Ed channel with co host Ben Gilpin. Brad was also recognized as 20 to watch by the National School Boards Association, and he was named Minnesota's Principal of the Year in 2016. He presents keynotes and breakout sessions on a variety of topics related to innovative leadership, and highlights can be found on his website about the breakout sessions and the keynotes that he presents. Welcome to the podcast, Brad.
Hey, Dana, so great to connect. You can find highlights, lowlights, everything on the website, right? We don't
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
overpromise anything here.
Well, tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
Yeah, in a technical sense, I've never been in like real actual trenches. So
Uh-huh.
hat tip to the men and women serving our country um, who have done that. But I think I get the nature of the question. So like one time that comes to mind, there's actually two. The quick one is I was student teaching, which might be a
Mm-hmm.
little early to be in the trenches, but like a survival type moment.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a computer lab trying to like prove I'm somewhat competent and that I can do this thing called teaching. And there's a kiddo who needed help, so I was trying to implement like, what did they teach me in college? What do I do? Well, you kind of get down at their level, like all that
Uh-huh.
stuff that becomes instinctive over time. So I went to help this kiddo and I crouched out, I put my hands on my knees and kind of bent
Mm-hmm.
down to get at their computer level and talk them through whatever issue they were having. And I was evidently out of shape because my legs were getting tired as I was helping. So I looked for a nearby chair and I pull that up instead of the
Mm-hmm.
crouch, the squat position. And I sit down on the thing and it just shatters, like crash,
Mm-hmm.
quicker than I even knew it was happening. So the chair was broken, which I didn't realize. That's why it was actually set off to the side. So I'm laying on my back, like wondering what just happened.
Yeah.
And feeling, embarrassed, but just instinctively I hop up and go to help the kid again. And they're probably like, and this is fourth grade, by the way.
Uh,
They're probably like, who is this clown? And so I have to go back to the kneeling thing or whatever. I put my hands on my knees and I just lean in and help
mm-hmm.
them. And like a minute after that, my mentor, my cooperating teacher came up to me and just subtly says, Brad, you might want to untuck your shirt. Your pants split and your underwear are sticking out. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So the rest of the day I'm walking around school with my shirt untucked because I had shattered my pants or I don't even know what happened. So I did survive all that. And maybe eventually reclaimed a little bit of street credit with the kiddos and they realized I wasn't as big of dork as I let on in that
Yeah.
moment in time. But I did want to share like a really quick, if you don't mind, like a
Sure.
more of a real or a current time in the trenches. So when
Mm-hmm.
I think of trenches, I do think of like survival, like something that's really hard. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's such a great question, Dana. And this pandemic thing has been hard on a lot of people in a lot of different ways. And I think educators in particular have every single day are living in that and probably nodding their head at how difficult this has been. But there was a moment where all this time I had tried to provide like steadfast leadership and
Mm-hmm.
tried to help people and support them. And I was struggling. And I was in a sub meeting, like a committee meeting, basically,
Mm-hmm.
with our team. So in with some teacher leaders talking about something really important. And I had a list of things that basically I needed that were given to me to carry out, from kind of from central office. Like make sure to do this, this, and this. And I was feeling overwhelmed, didn't know how we were going to do it. And all these things are going through my head and I lost it a little bit. And I owned it. I just told them, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm not at my best right now, but how are we going to do this, this, and this? Because they were
Mm-hmm.
kind of talking about some strategy and stuff. And and I just was really stressed out and they were so gracious. And I remember one person in particular, although it was a team vibe,
Mm-hmm.
they repeated something that I've tried to say over the years and over time, and they just said, Brad, don't worry, we will do what's meaningful. We
Mm-hmm.
will figure this out, and we have been doing meaningful work in this area all along. These new guidelines or directives
Mm-hmm.
aren't so, we will make them meaningful for our staff, and we'll do them, because I think the rule, like the survival rule follower in me was coming
Mm-hmm.
out, like, we got to do this, we this is my, my job, our job, we're required to do this. But it was like a boomerang, where that meaningful boomer, it came back to me. And the confidence I got from the team. So really, it wasn't me crawling out of the trench, like your
Mm-hmm.
question alluded to. It was more like them pulling me out. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll never forget how freeing and empowering it felt to not have to be the answer or be perfect, but to realize that, like, we have got a really solid team here. And when one of us is really struggling, like, we're still going to do really great work together.
Mm-hmm. No, I really like that story. It kind of reflects how a lot of leaders and teachers and just people working in schools this past year almost, and how the team effort really plays a role into, how well a day somebody has, how quickly or efficiently they're able to complete a task. Just people being there to understand that you're not always having the best day, and people do have a short fuse sometimes with all the other stressors that are going on. So I really like that. The team was gracious, and they knew they'd cover you. They'd have your back. So
Yeah, and I
I
think
really.
I was like, if you're wondering, well, what does it look like when Brad is struggling or rattled?
Yeah.
In this moment, it was more internal. Like, I
Uh-huh.
just think it was an immense amount of stress. It wasn't
Hmm.
like I was yelling and cussing or
Yeah.
cursing or anything like that. It was just, I was really struggling, and it was hard to get through that. It does kind of, something you just said triggered. Like, we're not always, everyone on a team isn't always going to be at their best every single
Hmm.
day or every single moment of every day. So hopefully the leadership collectively is working to create a culture that's so collaborative that we can tap into and lean on and highlight and amplify people who are at their best, so that the
Hmm.
best thinking prevails, and that the best mindsets are, come alongside people who might be struggling and just need clarity, and that lots of listening is happening in between, so that we're
Hmm.
informed by everyone,
Hmm.
if
Hmm.
if that makes sense.
No, I really like that quote. Amplifying what needs to be done, and the best in everybody. And that kind of leads into my first question about, just tell me a little bit about your role right now. What does it look like? We're at the beginning of February. Elementary school leadership in your area in Minnesota. Are you back full time, hybrid, and how does everything look in the building for you, and kind of any recent challenges that maybe have
Mhm.
occurred?
Yeah, well, a couple things. It's a little bit of a juxtaposition in that
Mm-hmm.
we get to work with kids, and we
Mm-hmm.
get to work with adults who have committed their lives to serving and teaching and investing in kids. And, like, that's a really beautiful, powerful thing that, like, I mean, the honest thing is, if you ever walk into a kindergarten classroom and we're having a bad day, it's really hard to leave
Yeah.
without, first of all, having an immense amount of gratitude for the professionals in that room doing
Yeah.
that work, but also without just letting the kiddos touch your soul. So
Yeah.
there's that going on, and that's happening again, which is great. But then there's also the reality of, like, so where we're at right now in our school, in our district, is our youngest learners are back. So
Mm-hmm.
K-5 is back full time every day. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And we have this optional distance choice program where the families who aren't ready for that, or the kiddos have different needs, they're able to learn from home remotely from teachers, from designated teachers. So those kind of two parallel programs, but we're
Mm-hmm.
as full as we've been since the pandemic started,
Mm-hmm.
basically following, safety guidelines and being really diligent with that. But it's against those two kind of competing backdrops of,
Mm-hmm.
we get to work with kids, and kids are incredible, and incredibly needy too sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
especially as they're kind of navigating their place in the world at this really difficult time. But also with everything that people and educators have come through and continue to go through, like,
Mm-hmm.
it's really hard for anyone listening who might not be an educator. Like, far be it from me to compare. I'm not going to compare
Mm-hmm.
who's working harder, or, we know parents have really stepped up the plate and struggled, and businesses, et cetera. but I can speak, or at least try to speak on behalf of the teachers that I get to work with every day. They're working ridiculously hard, and just when they're catching a cadence and momentum and traction, kind of the rules change and the pandemic guidance changes from the state. It's just a really, really, really hard thing. So thank goodness we're collectively committed to like creating this culture and this spot where we can have honest conversations and listen to one another about what is hard, because I can't imagine trying to do this alone or without like a team who listens, and then conversely without me listening to them, because I would be off in a completely different ballpark or paradigm than what I think kind of the leadership I'm noticing is needed right now.
And it really helps to have, those colleagues within the school, within the district, and also a PLN. Just what we've learned the past year, just being involved on Twitter and, others that I've connected with and finding out what they're doing. And, I think that really helps. And your situation is pretty similar to here in Colorado. We're back full time for K5, K6. But middle school and high school are hybrid for the moment. So how do you make sure your leadership is how you want it to look, despite challenges, as we kind of think about the upcoming school year and post-pandemic? How would you like teacher observations and teacher appreciation, those type of things to look as we end the spring semester and transition into next school year? Are there certain things that maybe you've been doing prior to the pandemic in terms of just observations and teacher feedback that maybe you'd like to do a lot more?
Yeah, thanks, Dana. So like I want leadership and how I'm trying to enter this space and serve and help to be congruent. I want there to be a congruency between like the vision and our mission and purpose and our words, the things that we say that we're going to commit to and how we're going to help, and then the action and how it actually feels and how it impacts people. And that's not like an aspirational wishy-washy thing. That's a really real challenge and burden and like a daily commitment. One example is with teacher wellness. We can say that we believe in teacher wellness all day long, as we should, especially in this environment, but like all the time. But then how does that actually feel and translate to the people in the classrooms closest to the kids? Like, is it just an optional PD session after school? Is it just us talking about it and saying, take care of yourselves, when then they're left to bear the brunt and figure everything out without enough time to do it? I mean, these are really real things that teachers are struggling with right now. So like observations where the rubber meets the road, like the approach that I'm trying to use is, we're going to do what's required with integrity as far as state and district requirements, but we're also going to try to make it incredibly safe for teachers, because, if I'm being completely honest, there are times it feels ridiculous to be in a classroom doing an observation in the middle of a pandemic. Sure. Like, come on, right? So how do we have that be meaningful to the people that we're trying to serve and get them things that are of value to them, like their safety, survival, and maybe even some feedback that helps. So it's little things like checking in if it's a required drop-in observation, just checking in and saying, is this an okay time? And having trust for them to be able to say, like, no, can you come back? Like, this is a horrible day. Like, just like those little things, when you pile those on top in a good way, the small acts of intentionality actually add up. And I do think they create this culture and trust and commitment to wellness. And that's not saying that we've arrived. We haven't. This is an ongoing thing that leaders need to work together on to help teacher leaders with, but like that's one I guess microcosm of the approach in getting through this together. Because as much as we want to be through this and be safe and have the pandemic be done, like it's not done, and teachers are still working like doubly hard from a job that was ridiculously hard before this pandemic.
Yeah, and I really like the point you said about creating that culture of trust, right? And giving the teachers the option, hey, it's not a good day, right? So, and moving along. And, there's a lot of ways that you can, take artifacts, take what students are doing, and not necessarily the drop in, right, that we've always done. Or I'm a strong believer of being in the classroom a lot throughout the day, and that doesn't always work with safety protocols, or if a school is still remote. So just viewing other things, right, and those feedback conversations, I think, also mean a lot in terms of any collection of data that we're working with the teacher on.
Yeah. So when I bop into like distance classrooms
Mm-hmm.
that are doing remote or Zoom-based instruction, I never know, like, because sometimes I'm kind of like, if it's a teacher prep time, I'm like, hey, how's it going? Or just like really genuinely happy to see you, but I
Yeah.
don't want to mess up. Zoom is hard enough to create student engagement with. It doesn't help to have some guy yelling as he's coming through the door. So I'm like, is this an okay time, or are you on Zoom or
Yeah.
not? But I was going to say on the observations too, I've tried to be really intentional and actually write down and honor the situation we're
Mm-hmm.
in that they're persevering from.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of my observation notes will actually like be prefaced by saying, something like, and it'll sound better when I'm not punting, but on a whim, like right here, like, let's keep in mind we're in the middle of a pandemic and
Mm-hmm.
you've been crushing it with this, and this. So this observation, although it will only focus on a few of the positive things I'm seeing,
Mm-hmm.
of course there are many more and much more that went into it. It's something better than that, but just
Mm-hmm.
owning the fact, like, this is a pandemic. So
Mm-hmm.
way to like show up in the
Yeah.
morning, right? Like that, like in my book, that's a legit victory.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and I really like how you're acknowledging, that they're really knocking it out of the ballpark, and just what they're doing to engage with those kids, and the kids probably won't remember this period of time, the elementary school kids, as much as the adults will, right? But the impact that those teachers are making on those children's lives, I think, really make a difference. And I have a daughter in 5th grade myself, and just seeing, she was remote for a short period of time before Christmas, and just seeing how she's so involved, and she working so hard on her science fair project and those type of things, right? And things look a little bit different, but they I think it's just that the relationship, as we all know, and just that the impact that those teachers are making on those kids, right? That really goes a long way. Um,
Yeah, and I think there's a parallel. Our
mhm,
ability as leaders to see, like really see teachers or have them feel seen, not just that we think we're
mhm,
checking in or
mhm,
seeing them, but to have them feel seen
mhm.
and support them in a way that's meaningful to them when they're struggling. Because I've noticed people's like stress tolerance is different during a
Mhm.
pandemic. Things
Mhm.
that wouldn't even rattle them in the past, it can be hard and it can get to us, and that's a normal thing. So just being in tune with that, and then also proactive, like on timing things. If there are certain things we need to roll out or do, like asking ourselves, do we absolutely need to change this or add this or do this? Because if the answer is no or maybe, like we maybe should pause this for a year or more. Like what's happening right now in schools is pretty impressive and important and darn near impossible. And
Yeah.
anything we can do not to mess that up, leaders should not do that thing.
Yeah. No new initiatives, right? So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your podcast, School Leadership Unearthed. And I noticed that it's been you've been putting out episodes for about 5 or 6 years now, and they're very short. That's kind of your niche there. They're less than 15 minutes. And you said you'd kind of been swamped for the past 6 months with school and everything, but do you have any upcoming ideas for themes for new episodes, and kind of what's your what's your recording timeline when you do these? Do you just record a whole bunch during a period of time and then put them out? And how has
Yeah,
that
good
kind of
question.
been?
Thanks for asking. So unearthed, like unearthed ed or unearthed
Mm-hmm.
is the technical name. And we do have a series that we're lining up right now. So my good friend and fellow principal from Michigan is
Mm-hmm.
Ben Gilpin. And typically we only record one episode, like when we're really on the ball and not
Mm-hmm.
in the middle of a pandemic. It's once a week. When
Mm-hmm.
when it's not, then it's kind of all bets are off. But we have science of reading is one that we're
Mm-hmm. Oh.
lining up to do, not just in this artificial theoretical construct sense,
Mm-hmm.
but like what do principals, what do school leaders know about reading? What do they not know? And how is that hurting kids? And like, what questions should we be asking? Like, how do you appropriately interrogate the science of reading? What does balanced literacy mean? And what are some dangerous things it can mean if we're not careful? It's a fascinating, but yet hugely important thing in full transparency that I didn't know nearly enough about until I've kind of dove into this relatively recently, and I'm starting to realize how kind of sort of ignorant I was, or I'm probably being a teeny bit too hard on myself, but there's a really important literacy stuff that all leaders should know, not just people in formal literacy roles. Like if you're going to lead a school, you can't lead by delegating literacy. You really should have a solid understanding of certain debates that are happening in the field, where we've missed the mark, segments of the population or kiddos that we're missing the mark on. And then, like you said, with the PLN thing, professional learning or personal learning network, how are we going to connect and learn and get better ourselves and to help kids better in this particular area? So Ben and I are excited about that. But yeah, we got some shows in the hopper, so we're ready to march forward into 2021.
Great. Yeah, and I think that's a good point, the literacy piece, because I've been administrator at the secondary level, and I know literacy is important at every level, but more so in the elementary. But you feel like as a leader, you can't always know every subject area, right? Like I taught foreign languages, but I mean, I don't know that much math, right? And it's hard to, know the latest and greatest with math, but definitely diving into literacy, knowing, what is the current method of teaching, what should we know? I think that's really important. Having principals learn more about the literacy concepts and the science of reading. So actually, discussing that on your podcast and having that out there as to, what we should be learning more, and discussing with our colleagues, like you said, on the PLNs, and with the colleagues in the districts.
And something I'm writing about right now, Dana. So this is like formative thinking, at least for me. Other people who have been around the literacy block longer probably have this all down. But for me as a leader, it's developing questions that will actually be helpful to either capacity building at the site level, or in the lives of like creating enriched reading experiences for kiddos. And really, so having a small repertoire of important questions. Like half the time I haven't even known what questions to even ask. So it's not even about knowledge or necessarily trying to be an expert in literacy. It's like at least understanding what should I be asking in this situation.
Yeah. And also that helps during those observations, like what should you be asking the students about what they're learning, right? Because you get a lot of information just engaging with the students going into the classrooms, and knowing what to ask, knowing what the right questions are, right? I wanted to ask you a little bit about any of the professional development that you've been giving during the pandemic. You noted in the pre-chat that you did do an in-person conference. It was in Minnesota over the summer, and
so I've sometimes I lose track of this. So there was one over in Idaho this summer, like when the airport was really completely empty. And I was so impressed. It was a leadership conference. I was so impressed with the safety and everything that they had going on. And everyone that I came across was taking it really serious. But there have been a slew of virtual conferences and kind of learning series that have continued, the past 10 months or so too. But I feel like I'm missing, this is kind of embarrassing, but I feel like there have been other face-to-face events that they're just not jumping out at me now. But yeah, that people, like, as overwhelmed as this whole situation is, people are wanting to connect and talk about things that really matter, like not necessarily pre-canned, things that aren't relevant to them, but things that really matter and will help them and fill their buckets. Like those are still really important, and figuring out alternate ways to either personalize delivery, whether it's face-to-face or in person, has been kind of a fun adventure.
Yeah, and I know your schedule looks quite different than it did prior to the pandemic, because you were traveling quite a lot, right? How many weeks per year or weekends or per month actually were you traveling?
Yeah, it varies, and obviously summer is busier than during the school year. The one
Mhm.
that's like the one beauty of I always try to be really cognizant of my first job, aside from being a
Uh-huh.
dad and a husband, but it's like taking care of home base here and
Yeah.
serving and relishing my time as a principal. But in the opportunities that come up during the school year, I just try to thoughtfully make sure commitment number one is taken care of, and then if I'm able to do that, and blessed to be able to do that, then I do it. So that wasn't really a number, but
Yeah.
it's been a lot of fun. And suffice it to say, things are busy in the Gustafson family household, not just
Mhm.
with this type of fun stuff, but also with like fun, like recreational stuff. That's another
Yeah,
side.
I saw on Instagram you guys had like helmets on. Were you
Yeah,
skiing
yeah,
or?
yeah. We were snowmobiling.
Okay.
So had never done that before,
Oh,
but
wow.
this, yeah, we had tried it last year, and then we actually got a couple of used snowmobiles this year, and it's been really cool.
And you guys have enough snow there, and it's
Yeah, we have enough
quite
snow in. I'm in Minnesota, and it's actually been a really great year.
okay.
Strangely enough, you might think we always have like 20 feet of snow, but there are some years where you hardly have any. So
Yeah.
snowmobilers have told me, like, you never know, enjoy it while it's here, because some years you
Yeah.
don't have as much. But generally speaking, at the very least, we have cold winters. So
Yeah, and right now we're experiencing very mild temperatures in the Denver area, but it's kind of like there's enough snow in the ski resorts, but sometimes they have to make snow, and there haven't been a lot of snowstorms this year, so yeah, we tend to ski. I haven't gone snowmobiling yet, but yeah, definitely taking that time and exploring new pastimes, right, with the family and getting
Mhm.
out there, and I think that's definitely something a lot of families and just people I see on social media that have done, getting out there and enjoying the weather. I wanted to
Hey Dana, real
sure.
quick, for Christmas, I don't know what my wife was thinking, but I was so happy that she had this might be her only moment of like lapse of judgment in her whole
Uh-huh.
life. She got me a karaoke system, a karaoke
Oh wow.
machine for
Okay.
Christmas, and I cannot sing. That's why I'm saying, like, I feel really lucky. But the fact we had it out in the basement this weekend, and a couple of my kids and we started out singing and just kind of being knuckleheads and dancing, and then it turned into we started playing ping pong, and then my
Uh-huh.
son was like being an announcer while we were
Oh
playing.
wow.
So it was good times had inside the house and outside the house.
Yeah. That's something that I think my kids would just be thrilled if we got. But we did get a foosball table for
Oh,
my
I love
daughter's
foosball.
birthday recently. So
Amazing.
I wanted to talk a little bit about Renegade Leadership, which isn't showing up so much in the background there, but the book talks a lot about empowering and collaborating with students in the digital age, and it was published in 2019. But you talked a lot about just ways that leaders can prepare students just to use activities, online activities, and just using instructional leadership in the digital age. So, based on the fact that your school had been using this experiential learning for a while, how do you feel that your teachers were prepared when it came to just switching to online learning last spring?
Yeah. Oh, good question. So really quick on the Renegade Leadership book, exciting news. Very recently, it was
Mm-hmm.
just translated into Persian.
Oh, wow.
So it was really cool just to look at the text in the book
Uh-huh.
and see some of the graphics and images converted that way. It was just really cool to know like leaders are immersed in some really similar work on the other side of the
Mm-hmm.
ocean. That's
Yeah.
like crazy. That's like mind blowing. But as far as like teacher preparation, so real quick, in Renegade Leadership, like the DNA of the book is really the Renegade code.
Mm-hmm.
So like 4 attributes of learning: collaboration, ownership, like learner ownership, digital connectivity, experiential learning, all underpinned by relationships. But that's where
Mm-hmm.
the code comes from. I feel like our team, our teachers, like lived out a lot of those things. Not that any
Mm-hmm.
of us had it mastered, but to varying degrees and levels, like we would see the heartbeat of student ownership in our school beats really strong. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's just something that we amplify student voice and look for new and different and meaningful ways to have kids like share what matters to them and pursue things that matter and be curious. So in that respect, like we were really prepared. On the
Mm-hmm.
other hand, we didn't see this coming, and we
Yeah.
weren't prepared. And one of the hardest things about making these learning model switches with COVID-19, it's the rapid rate and amount of learning that was monumental.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same exact time, people are battling things like their own survival and
Mm-hmm.
nervousness about relatives and their safety. When you add that to like this thing that teachers have been doing, it's really, really, really incredible and hard, and they deserve all the credit in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But to answer your question, I think I think our team as learners, I've always been impressed by that, and like I see them as second to none in the area of learning. And
Mm-hmm.
like years before drones were more mainstream in education, our team was experimenting with them and embedding them in the curriculum. And same with 3D printing. And not those are some things, but same with like knitting looms and integrating Play-Doh into play. Just all of the things that engage kiddos in ways that are meaningful for them to explore, to show their learning, to invent new learning. Like I noticed our team doing. So
Mm-hmm.
that type of mindset, as you can imagine, of course, really, really helped when we had to learn how to go to 100% remote, how to build relationship in an
Mm-hmm.
online sense, things like that. That doesn't mean that it was easy by any means, but at the
Mm-hmm.
very least, it meant I think our team had a core amount of skills that made me really proud to serve them. And
Yeah, and I think this book, although this was written before the pandemic, and a lot of people have, used a lot of tools during the pandemic that might have not used before. I think this is more of a guide to, covers a variety of topics. It's not just empowering students, to be active and engaged during the digital age, but it's also about personalized PD, for example. And as I said during the pre-chat, that's something I spoke about in during a few breakout sessions and conferences this past year. And how do you see kind of PD evolving in this post-pandemic world? And teachers, choosing their own PD versus kind of the sit and get, or the district or school telling them what they should learn.
yeah, well, a quick thing, because I'm kind of the squirrel type, like
Mm-hmm.
squirrel. So you distracted me really quick on
Sure.
mentioning that chapter from Renegade Leadership.
Uh-huh.
When I wrote the personalized PD chapter, there were other chapters that I was madly in love with, and they were
Uh-huh.
powerful and they resonated. That was a chapter that was powerful. It was work we were doing,
Uh-huh.
but I didn't expect it to have a big impact. That's
Yeah.
actually the chapter I probably get the most feedback on. Like,
Yeah.
thank you, and we're trying this and this. So it's like you just never know what's gonna resonate with people or what's needed. But it probably speaks to the point of your question. Like, this is something I think for as long as I can remember, educators want learning that matters because we don't have a lot of time. So if someone
Mm-hmm.
is going to require that we quote unquote have to learn because it's during the duty day at
Yeah.
a workshop or an in-service or et cetera, like isn't it reasonable to expect that it's relevant and matters
Mm-hmm.
and has some of the same attributes that we would expect teachers to implore with their kiddos, like elements of choice and relevancy and things like that. Like that
Mm-hmm.
seems really reasonable. So when you ask, like, how is this going to change, or what does it look like during the pandemic? This is why I'm so passionate about leadership. Like, hopefully, what it looks like is school leaders and principals modeling what responsive professional learning can look like, that's informed by the actual needs of
Mm-hmm.
teachers that they serve through things like choice. So that's one
Mm-hmm.
really quick, like how the heartbeat of Renegade Leadership still lives on in me and our school, and why I've actually still referenced the book during the pandemic. It's like, so we've had this series on teacher wellness this school year for several months in a row, but we always gave a choice. Like the alternate session is this, like go to what meets your needs.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't just arbitrarily land on those topics and options, by the way. They're planned through a series of conversations and actually listening to people
Mm-hmm.
in what they're interested in or what they need more time to do. So that's how it's like alive and well. And that's the vision that I have for helping it catch on more and actually continue to manifest in classrooms. Teachers shouldn't be personalizing instruction kind of in spite of what they're seeing and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
experiencing in the PD that's planned for them. Like hopefully the PD that's planned is like co-created with them, and it inspires,
Mm-hmm.
affirms, and is so responsive that they can't help but think that like this is learning and then want to carry it back to the classroom. And I know like that's probably more the exception than the rule, but I think we owe it to our people
Mm-hmm.
to have that be the bar, have that be the standard.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's something that is going to change as we move into the 21-22 school year, because I've seen that reflected in several leadership books, written recently, just about how people are they're professionals. Let them take charge of their own learning, right? Have them design. What fits them, what fits their needs. And I've been in the profession for over 20 years, and there's we think about, I'm the kind of person who would always choose what the district had to offer, and I go to workshops that weren't mandatory, right? But you have those people, they'll just go to what the school or district says you have to go to, and otherwise they're not going to go to much, right? So I think if we as leaders have suggestions, for people, or saying, hey, this is available, pass along a flyer that's out there through the district, and just let people know, especially for those that aren't exactly, really gung ho about PD, but just have those suggestions available, and then they can decide with their team or individually what they should attend.
And some people, probably rightfully so,
Mm-hmm.
aren't gung-ho about PD
Yeah.
because it's been so terrible and
Yeah.
unresponsive for many, many years in
Yeah.
some cases. So I don't even fault people who have kind of a bitter taste in their mouth. What I did want to make a quick point, like if there is value in having people have common training and things along those
Mm-hmm.
lines. So to district level leaders and colleagues and even principals who are receiving like directives
Yeah.
from the district team, there is a way to personalize learning even when you have to deliver something to all staff.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's in the delivery model, like would you like to do online forum or kind of a hybrid type thing,
Mm-hmm.
or more of a conversational approach, so you can quote unquote deliver the same content or have some of the same like targets,
Mm-hmm.
but have it be much more responsive, time of day, reading, kind of the flipped model that we've done some of at our school too, like
Mm-hmm.
reading in advance and then having a conversation about it. So where there's a will, there's a way. And when
Yeah.
leaders commit to like having PD be more personalized and supportive of the people in classrooms, by golly, we will make it happen. If we haven't made a priority yet, probably
Mm-hmm.
it'll look the same in 10 years. So I do,
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'm pushing back a little bit, Dana. I don't think things will change automatically. And to anyone listening, I would say, like, if you're noticing or hearing feedback that the PD, either you or someone else is planning, isn't meeting your needs, like have that conversation and
Mm-hmm.
and offer suggestions and feedback, because I haven't met anyone at any level who doesn't care. I
Mm-hmm.
just think that either they're not aware or they don't know how to do better yet. So that's
Mm-hmm.
why just the dialogue is so valuable.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. Making sure that people have the conversation, and express any needs with their leader about conferences they'd like to attend, or just something they want to learn more about. And when I taught, that was never shot down, right? I mean, they supported that, and it was often with the request of bring that back to the department, and show how that's going to be implemented or used with your colleagues, et cetera. But that's a good point to bring forth. Out of everything we discussed today on the podcast, what is something in particular you'd like listeners to remember?
Yeah, I think the importance, and I was actually just talking to another friend and like school leader about this, the importance of listening
Mm-hmm.
um, has never been as significant as it is right now.
Mm.
So like, and that's been something I've even learned relatively recently. Instead of going into a meeting with an idea or evidence that's different than what a
Yeah.
parent has experienced, like if they're seeing something at home, they don't necessarily need me to come and say, well, here's how I see it at school.
Mm-hmm.
Although, that might be helpful, but hopefully people who are listening just hear, like, I can be a better leader and probably person if at least half the time I'm listening and learning and adapting and not being so rigid in like my current opinion. Like other people have ideas and experiences that were forged from kind of what they've been through and from their gifts and strengths. And the more that we look for that and listen for that, I just think the more enriched school and this planet can be.
I really like that. Where can people find you online and connect with you?
Yeah, I'll give two ways. So the website that you mentioned earlier is bradgustafson.com, and that's got, whether you want to do a book study for Renegade Leadership or Reclaiming Our Calling, or look at some video that goes with each of those chapters, or blog posts, or speaking resources, that's like a good one-stop shop. And then on Twitter, it's, or Instagram, I suppose too, is Gustafson Brad, or at Gustafson Brad. So I just love connecting and learning, and hope people reach out and connect.
Great. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the Out of the Trenches podcast. Have a great rest of your day.
I feel like we just made it out. Great job, Dana.